Hello goons and gals, it is Doug here with the Bornagoon channel, and I would like to welcome you to today's video where I will be discussing how much money I have spent, how much money I continue to spend, and how much money I will spend in the future on the beloved CRF 450 RL, also known as Seabiscuit. Now before I do begin, let me say that I truly hope you love the content that I have put together for you today, because you have no idea the amount of risk that I am taking right now by publishing such information upon the interwebs. Because if my wife is to ever find out how much money I have spent on a dirt bike, I'm going to get divorced. So if I happen to go AWOL and you don't hear from me for a while, you know what happened. Now you might be asking yourself at this very moment, Mr. Goon, why would you put yourself in harm's way just for the sake of our entertainment? While very admirable, it seems to be quite stupid. And you know what? You have a point there. But here's why I'm doing this video today, my friends. Number one, I want to reach out to my fellow CRF 450 RL brothers and sisters out there who own this motorcycle and realize why it is the color red. Because it symbolizes the blood that's being drained from your bank account on a monthly basis. I'd also just like to reach out to any one of you out there that happen to own a motorcycle of any color, because you're doing the same thing. And you know what? We're all doing it with a lovely devilish grin upon thy faces, because that's what we like to do, right? And last, I want to reach out to anyone who has questions about this bike, who's in the market for the CRF 450 RL and wants to know how much money do I need to spend on this bike. That's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to do it in three different segments here. One, we're going to start talking about the bare minimum that you need to put into this bike, just to make it a great motorcycle that you can have years of enjoyment with. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about what have I done so far, the modifications that I have put into it, and the total that I have wrapped up into this bike. And there is a blueprint out there on how you can build, let's say, the perfect dual sport or adventure motorcycle from this CRF 450 RL platform. It's amazing, by the way. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll begin with number one. And unfortunately, I had to write this stuff down, and I'm a bit embarrassed. But let's say that you are the cheapest rider that wants to spend the least amount of money on modifications. That's the kind of rider that you are. Here's what I think you will need. First off, we all know by now the true problem with the CRF 450 RL, and that is the ECU unit. So you will immediately need to replace this, or very soon after purchasing this bike. You're going to get tired of riding with the stock ECU. You're going to need either the Vortex, the new AIM ECU, or the Get ECU. Now you're probably thinking, Mr. Goon, why do you have 3 ECU units? Now let me give you a little taste of the future, guys. Coming up here in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing a shootout between all 3 of these ECUs. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to give a special shout out to Mike at Moto, who was kind enough to loan these out for an honest review back-to-back test. So make sure you come back to the channel and check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to do a shootout on these. Now let's move along. So you're going to need that. It's about $1,000, depending on which one you choose, give or take. I recommend that you get the throttle tamer. I did a video on this not too long ago. The G2 throttle tamer, together with the ECU, makes this bike a completely different animal, really smooths out the power, and it's really nice in that format. And last, I think if you're going to ride this bike any further than the length of your driveway, you got to do something about this seat, because the stock seat is just horrible. Now, when I did my first impressions video, I said I didn't think the seat was that bad. The second time I rode the bike, I'm like, the seat is really, really bad. I've owned motocross bikes. I know it's a motocross seat. I've owned motocross bikes in the past. I've never been on a seat that hard. I mean, it just got worse and worse. I eventually broke down and went with the seat concepts. If you guys remember, who's visited this channel quite a few times, I did this DIY version of the seat, which in truth was a lot more comfortable than the seat concept, but it didn't look that way. And because I'm a shorter rider, I wanted to go with a low seat. I could never get the symmetry right. And I don't think you guys liked it, because when I published the video, it wasn't one of my most popular ones. So, oh well, I was trying. So just bare minimum, you need the ECU, the G2 throttle tamer, and a seat. And that's going to put you at about $1,300 to $1,400, depending on where you buy it. So that's not too bad. Now let's move on to some stuff that I have put on there, which you'll probably do a lot of these. Towards the end of this, there might be a little bit of mixing and matching that you'll do for just rider preference, and I understand that, but it's going to be along the same lines. So probably what most of you are going to end up doing is doing some exterior protection. So I got the Tusk hand guards, I think brush guards. I think most of you are going to go with something like this. It's like $80. I went with the Polished Sport frame protectors and the swing arm protectors. Now, I especially went with these because it is very rough and abrasive out here where I'm riding in Las Vegas. So these have already paid dividends. I don't think you can see it here on the camera, but if you look down by the wheel nut there, there's like big gouge in the plastic already. So they've been paying dividends. So if you're going to do any sort of aggressive off-roading or taking it into some sketchy terrain, you're going to need to get some frame protection. It doesn't take much to ding this up. So I've got about, say, $80 in those protections right there, $80 into this. Now, I've dropped the bike maybe 2 to 3 times, very lightly. Again, with the terrain out here, it's rough. This is something that you may or may not do, but if you're going to do enduro, I suggest that you do it. And that is buying some radiator guards. I went with the AS3 radiator guards, the enduro radiator guards. They're about $100, $105, depending on where you pick them up. I dropped the bike like 2 times on this side, already bent the radiator. Didn't take very much, very sensitive and very vulnerable on this bike. So if you just have a small tip over, it's easy to smash that, and you don't want to get trapped or stranded somewhere with a busted radiator by yourself on the trail. You will have to replace the tires in most cases very quickly. I waited a little bit longer to do mine, but I just recently bought a set for $300. And these IRC tires that come with it, I know they make great tires, but these are not the ones that are great. They're pretty good on the road. They're just horrible off-road. Now, to their credit, I haven't done any testing of these tires on anything else but this Las Vegas terrain, which is either deep sand or just rough, brutal, rocky desert terrain. Now, maybe if you live in a low meat area or something like that, maybe you can get by a little bit longer with these tires, but they're just getting shredded with all these hard rocks out here, so I went with something more desert oriented. But, you know, stock tires normally need to be replaced anyway because depending on how you ride, where you ride, you're going to want a tire that fits that type of style. So most people replace them. Just factor in $300. Now there's a couple of things that I've added personally just for my taste. One was I did the DIY screen, the adventure screen, in case I wanted to go 300-400 miles or something like that. On the freeway, I had some sort of wind protection, right? I'm a sissy now, going from the adventure bike to this. You don't have to do that, but you guys did like that video. It turned out really well. I was proud of that. You don't see it on the bike now because, as I said, it's very abrasive out here, and every time I drop the bike, I keep cracking my windscreen, so I'm just going to leave it off unless I'm going to take a trip that's longer than 200 miles. You will have to probably use something either with the bars, depending on the kind of rider you went. I went with some bar risers. I threw them away. I don't like them. I spent 80 bucks on them. I don't like bar risers because to me, they make your front end feel skittish. They don't do good with the handling of the bike. They change it, and I don't really know if they're necessary. I never liked them before. I don't even know why I bought them. I'd rather just go with a bigger bend on the handlebars. But maybe you find these handlebars, the standard CR bend that comes with this, I believe it is, to be a pretty good one. If not, just go with the CR high or CR low if you happen to be taller. You'd be better off going with a bend of handlebar rather than adding risers to it, in my personal opinion. And last, I put a set of supermoto wheels. They're not on there right now, but I got some supermoto wheels for $1,100. I probably should put the supermoto wheels in the must-have category. I mean, how do you not have supermoto wheels? I mean, that's the question we all must ask. You have to have supermoto wheels if you buy a bike like this. Just kidding, but total altogether, what I have in the bike is roughly about $3,500 to $4,000. Now that's not too bad if the bike was free, but since the bike costs about $12,500 out the door, and heck, maybe it's even more somewhere where you're at or less, you know, you're looking at about a $15,000 dirt bike, which takes you into different categories. I mentioned it before, maybe Africa Twin territory, 890R for the adventure riders, or you could buy 2 bikes probably for the price of that. So you have to decide whether or not that's worth it, and I'll get to that at the very end. Now for the last, the one that's just got all this money in their pocket, just wants to blow it on the bike, wants to make this your mission in life, to build the greatest 450 RL that's ever lived. Here's what I eventually want to put on this bike that I think will make it even more special. Obviously, I'd like to get to the pipe. I had to choose between the pipe and the supermoto wheels. I went with you know where I went, okay? That's going to cost about $1,500. You could start with the slip-on first and then add the header later, or maybe it just runs just fine like that. That's going to run about 1,500 bucks. I would like to change the skid plate to something a little stronger. The plastic's doing a pretty good job, but I do want to get an aluminum plate or something a lot stronger. Again, it's very, very abrasive out here. You can choose to do that if you want, but I have to say that the plastic one isn't so bad. I'd like to change the foot pegs. I mentioned in my first impressions, I thought they were great for stock pegs, and they are. They're wide, they're nice, but I would like to have something a little bit wider, so factor in another couple of $100 there. I'd like to add the IMS tank, which is about $300. The thermostat removal kit, which is about another $200 to $300, and the recluse clutch, which could be anywhere from $600 to $1,000, maybe even $1,200. So if you were to do all of that, you would have roughly $19,000 to $20,000 in your bike, including the cost of the bike. You'd have about $19,000 to $20,000 into a dirt bike. So let me answer this one. Do I regret spending any money on this bike? No, not at all. And here's why. When I got this bike, if you guys remember, I asked a lot out of this, maybe more than other riders, because I was trying to fill 3 different types of riding with one bike. And that's almost impossible to do. The first thing I wanted my bike to do is to be better on the single track. You watch those old videos of me on the Tiger. It was just a nightmare off-road. Every time you dropped it over, it was so hard to pick up, had terrible ground clearance. It's just not made for that. So I was intimidated on some of the trails with that big bike, and I wanted something that made me feel better where I could ride more aggressive terrain. This accomplished that. Now, is this the best single track, hardcore enduro bike? No, it's not. I mean, maybe you need a 250 or 350 or something like that, a 2-stroke. But it gets the job done really well with these modifications. I also wanted my bike to still have some adventure capabilities because I'm coming from the Tiger 800. So if I wanted to ride 500 or 700 miles or do a BDR or just ride around the Southwest a little bit, I didn't want to feel like after I got off the bike that I had no feeling in my lower extremities, and I needed to have my legs amputated. This bike is amazing, and I think all of these newer dual sports, I have to say, coming from 40-year background almost of riding, I cannot believe how well these single-cylinder dual sports are behaving on the highway. It truly is amazing compared to some of the older bikes. So I wanted to be able to do that. Did it accomplish it? Yes. Is it a GS 1250? Is it like my Tiger 800 or a Tiger 900? No. But it's good enough to pull off 500 to 700 miles a day and not kill you in the process. So it's truly amazing. So it did fulfill that. And last, I wanted to get back into some track riding. Now, most of you probably don't know this, but my channel has only been centered up to this point around adventure riding and dual sporting. But my true passion and my true background comes from road racing. That's what I did most of my life with riding, and I truly miss it. Maybe in the future I can incorporate that a little bit into the channel. But I wanted to get back into tracks. That's why I got the supermoto wheels. I want to go to supermoto tracks. I want to have a little bit of fun. And if I went out to the track, could I just hang with some 600s? Could I just not embarrass myself out there and just keep pace with them? The answer is yes. Yes, it is an amazing supermoto bike. You can take it to any racetrack, and you can just get around there just fine on this bike. It handles amazing on a racetrack. So if I were to purchase all 3 of those, if I went out and got me a 350cc 2-stroke, I went and got me an R1 with slicks for the track, and I went out and bought a brand new Tiger 900, I'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000, maybe $50,000 with 3 different motorcycles. And truth be told, I accomplished that with the Honda. Now, is it the best in every category? No, but it's right where it needs to be for me, and it achieves those. Now, here's why that's important to someone like you. Maybe you begin your riding and you're younger and you're doing motocross tracks. I mean, you could do motocross tracks if you want to on this. And you're doing the trail riding. Then your buddies or friends come along and they want to take a long trip on their GS bikes. You can go. You can make a couple of small modifications and you can go and enjoy yourself and not feel like a total idiot. If you want to change your riding and go to track riding, you can take this. There's so much that you can do with this bike. You can start young and grow into this bike. Or no matter what type of riding you have chose to do, you can fulfill that if that's the kind of rider you are. Now, if you have just one solo purpose and you're sticking to one thing, sure, there's better choices out there. But if you're looking for the all-arounder, perfect unicorn bike that so many people are desperately trying to build or make or to create or ask manufacturers to, man, you got this here. And I know I was very disappointed in this bike, but as soon as I had put the ECU in it, got this engine working, this thing just amazing. I'm totally in love with Seabiscuit here. It's the real Seabiscuit, not the pre-Seabiscuit with the original owners. It's now the full-on legendary Seabiscuit. Loving this bike, and I could keep this thing for years. So, do I regret that? Will you regret that, spending this kind of money? And the answer is no. Because you know what, guys? Riding motorcycles is not what we do. Riding motorcycles is what we are. We're all out there doing our 9-to-5s or working in our environment or growing business, and we have life and family commitments. Having a motorcycle and riding a motorcycle, the real true purpose is to disconnect from the rest of the world. I don't know about you, but when I'm riding a bike, the rest of the world is shut off. It's just me and my bike. And I can accomplish everything I need with a bike. Sometimes I'm angry and I just want to go out and I want to ride as hard as I can, as fast as I can. Sometimes I just want to clear my mind and just cruise around the streets and just take in the air and let it hit my face and just feel good. Sometimes I just want to ride down a nice little moderate trail, pull over, pitch a tent, make myself a cup of coffee, and just enjoy nature for a while. Bikes serve that purpose for us to disconnect. And in our hectic and busy lives with all the BS that's going on in the world, it's our chance just to release, just to be with us, our thoughts, alone with our thoughts and our bike, and just enjoy ourselves. And to me, there's no amount of money that you can spend for happiness, right? So guys, I'm going to end it on that note. Don't forget to come back, subscribe, like the video for the shootout here. You're going to love what we got put together here for you. As always, remember, what I said in today's video is just my opinion only. I could be wrong.